Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast, brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, we're looking at a map here of the high temperatures on March 27th, and we can see this line right here is my 70-degree isotherm. So we can see a lot of warm air that pushed here to the central plains, and a lot of that even pushed pretty far north, hitting that snowpack that's still sitting in parts of the Dakotas, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Now, the cooler temperature you see here is due to sensible cooling due to that snowpack, but that warm up that we saw there, well, look at what it did to the snowpack. Let me take you back to the 12th of March. Now, this was before that massive low pressure system that caused all that flooding right in through this area. You can see that the snow extent was quite extensive back on when we go back to the 12th of March. But this was the 26th, and that warm up on the 27th even eroded that snowpack even further. But still, we have quite a bit of water locked up in that snowpack that still needs to melt and get down the Mississippi River, which is clearly in flood stage still. So our ongoing flood problem here in the middle part of the country is going to continue into the foreseeable future as these river gauges are still showing flood stages and we got a lot of snow to melt in this area. Well, in this forecast video, we're going to talk about if we're going to see any more snow in that area, how much precipitation to expect right here across the middle part of the country with this next system, and then we're going to look globally at several different regions to see how other regions are progressing into this spring. So let's just start off looking at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation. There was quite a bit of precip moving through parts of the eastern Corn Belt, including some early morning showers and thunderstorms here in central Illinois. To the south, we did see some severe weather that moved into parts of Alabama just the other day, and some nasty storms that moved through the the east coast of Florida, some of them producing hail, which is quite rare down there. Meanwhile, we come back across the middle part of the country, things are relatively quiet, but look in California. This is where our next system is emerging right now, and it's about to take shape in the central plains and spread a lot of rainfall in through this area. And we're going to certainly talk about that in the next few minutes here. Overall, just putting together our next week's total precipitation, you can see that the systems target California first, bring in quite a bit of rain, but some mountain snow here into the Pacific Northwest. And then as they get over the mountains, well, this next system is going to take off and follow a frontal boundary sitting here from a previous system that squeezed through. Meanwhile, we'll also watch early next week for a little shortwave trough to come out of parts of Texas and sweep across the southeast, bringing in some much needed rain to some drier places here. I know we're trying to get a crop planted, but we do need some rain there around coastal Carolina, especially South Carolina and parts of Georgia. So this is just looking out over the next week at our total accumulated precipitation, and I do want you to notice this. Really getting us through the next week, we don't see much precipitation over that area that's got a lot of snowpack. But we will be talking at the end of this video about a system emerging middle of next week that may hit this area pretty hard here with some more snow. So I'm sorry, North Dakota, but we're going to have to watch out for this next one coming through. Now, I want to take you to the mid-levels of the atmosphere and show you the phasing of two troughs that are going to make this next system happen. So we're looking here at a map that shows vorticity that's spinning the atmosphere. Wherever we see high vorticity values, and we see dips in the flow of the jet stream, okay, where they kind of make a U shape, that indicates, well, where we're going to be able to produce low pressure systems at the surface. So getting through Thursday into Friday morning, we see that first shortwave hitting California. Now, while this one's coming on shore, a wave has broken over the top of the ridge in Alaska, and it's now sitting right here, okay? And this is what's going to happen by the time we get into really Friday afternoon into Saturday morning. These two waves, this one here and this one here, are going to phase together. And what they're going to do is they're going to take this next system and they're going to shove it a little bit farther to the south and make it more quickly progress across the country. And as they do that, higher atmospheric pressure is going to build in very quickly behind this. Now, after that system goes through, and we'll talk about the details of that in just a few seconds here, I'm watching early next week, so this is now Sunday night into Monday morning, another shortwave to come right in here through the Four Corner States into Texas. Now, this one's going to take a much different trajectory, and it's going to skirt right here along the Gulf Coast, really going into the lower Mississippi River Valley, and then move over toward the Carolinas before it gets offshore. Now, that system, as it sweeps through, is going to be causing problems, down here across the southern states with rain and thunderstorms, especially some very heavy rain. We'll see that in a few minutes. But also another system sweeps through the northern plains. See that little shortwave right through there? And that one could be causing some problems for snowfall for snowfall for parts of the northern plains. Okay, so that's what I watch when I'm trying to figure out how these systems are going to progress. Let's now turn our attention to the high-resolution NAM model. What do we have going on? Well, there's a deep low sitting here in Canada, and it's dragging a front right in through this area. So we will see as the next system emerges in California and then takes shape here in the Central Plains, it's going to follow the trajectory of that front, which means this area in through here, especially right in through here, is going to see a lot of precipitation out of this next system. So this is our high resolution hour by hour NAM model. So I just took you through here midday on Thursday. We can see the widely scattered storms in the eastern Corn Belt progressing into the northeast. You can see a cluster of precipitation moving through by the time we get into mid-morning on Thursday, in through parts basically near Omaha, but getting through southern Iowa into northern Missouri. But it'll be on that boundary, you ready for this, where we really see the precipitation taking off. See it there? This is now late in the evening on Thursday, getting into early Friday morning, pressing across the eastern Corn Belt. Now, in the meantime, you've probably been noticing we have seen a couple of events moving through parts of the Dakotas and really into Montana. So as that precipitation progresses through the eastern Corn Belt, our next system is taking shape in the central United States, such that by Friday morning, it's really starting to emerge there in parts of Colorado, such that we get the main precipitation shield from Kansas to Nebraska to southwestern South Dakota, and then the heaviest snows back in Wyoming. And that's where we're going to try to confine the heaviest snows. Progressing through the day on Friday, yes, widespread rain here with this next system. But when we're talking about snow, it's going to be primarily western Nebraska, southwestern South Dakota, and Wyoming, getting some upslope flow in Wyoming. Now, because the system dips farther to the south into a little bit warmer air, some of the snow that you see spreading in through here is going to be a changeover event, which means it's going to be falling on some wet ground, and we're not expecting major accumulations in the eastern half of Nebraska with this system because it's too wet and then it's going to be too warm. But don't rule out the fact that we could get some really slushy snow that kind of mixes in on the backside of the system with how quickly the higher air pressure and colder air moves in. So you can see that by early Saturday morning, this system has moved on off to the north and east, and it's going to make a very tricky forecast for the northeast because of that rain-snow boundary. But a very, very wet time period in the eastern Corn Belt progressing forward here. Now, meanwhile, as that system takes shape, this is on Friday over here, our main severe weather threat's going to be to the south, primarily in parts of western Missouri, really getting into Oklahoma and western Arkansas. We could see some storms build down a line in through here. General thunderstorm risk mainly to the north of this. Once we get into Saturday, that risk is going to shift more toward the mid-south and the mid and lower Mississippi River Valley there from Tennessee down into Mississippi and Arkansas. So we're going to watch those areas for strong to severe storms with this first system. Now let's switch over to the European model, which allows us to go out a little bit farther with these systems here than the high-res NAM. First of all, here's our coastal low coming on. There is the boundary still tucked away on which those showers and storms are progressing through the eastern Corn Belt today. So as we let this play forward, I took you all the way out to Saturday morning where we've already kind of diagnosed this system. What will we see going from Saturday morning? Well, you can see the snow on the backside, the heavy rain out ahead of this. And this system progresses very quickly toward the northeast. By the time Sunday morning is here, higher atmospheric pressure dominates the central plains, and the main frontal boundary is sweeping through basically from Texas all the way up to New York. Now, what will be very tricky about this system is what the changeover to snow will be like on the backside of this by the time we get into Saturday afternoon, evening, and early Sunday morning. It's going to be a very, very difficult forecast. We're going to have to watch it kind of moment by moment. We'll have an update about this on Friday. Higher pressure then builds in. Okay, next systems to be watching. Next system comes on to California there. Meantime, remember that shortwave I told you moving through Texas? Well, watch what that shortwave does across the Gulf states here. It races right there, really through parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and then really brings in some heavy rainfall into this region. And that is an area that we need it. We've been dry in through this area, and we need to bring in some rain, which helps us later on this season. Now, meanwhile, and we're getting pretty far out here, the models are convinced about this big low pressure system that's going to be emerging somewhere here in Montana and North and South Dakota and go just like this. A lot of warm air advection out ahead of this. Look how windy the central plains are going to be out ahead of this next system. But what I don't like is that as the system takes shape, look, on the back side of this one enough cold air in place to possibly bring in quite a bit of snowfall. So if I get those drawings off there and let you see that kind of in full play here, you can see that we got to be watching midweek next week for this next system. Details are unknown at this point, but the last few model runs have been pretty consistent, both with the US model called the GFS and the European model, which I'm showing you right here. I just want to let you know, I'm going to play this quickly. The pattern stays active as we continue to progress into the first week of April here, all right? Now, total snowfall. Like I said, we'll be getting some wet snowflakes pushing into parts of western South Dakota, southwestern South Dakota, but western Nebraska and western Kansas. And the changeover in through here may see some slushy snow at times. Where do we not see snow? Thankfully, not here in the northern plains with this first system. And this will be the trickiest snowfall forecast out of this as we look here toward Ohio, getting up into parts of upstate New York. It'll be interesting to see how quickly this changes over and how much snow we get in that area. But really, Wyoming, two entirely different places. Wyoming will be getting much of the snow here, and we will see as that system comes on shore that we'll be hitting the Sawtooth Mountains with quite a bit as well. Okay, so that's our snowfall outlook. Now watch what temperatures are going to do here. This is starting us off Thursday morning. As we progress forward with the high pressure building in behind this, that's where the cold wave comes in. And it looks as though that cold front gets all the way to the Gulf Coast, dropping temperatures anywhere between 10 and 20 degrees cooler than average. So this is going to be the cooler start to the beginning of April. But remember that next system that goes through the northern plains? Look at the major warm-up out ahead of that one, April 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of next week. And that big warm-up that comes through there, again, volatile temperature pattern, that's April, that's what we expect, a cool down behind it. But the model's not picking up on that big of a cool bias for much of the country with this next one. And we're going to expect to see a pretty quick rebound in temperatures after that. So that brings me to one concern I've been stressing, which is how far to the south are we going to bring our freezing line here? Because the vegetation across the south is very sensitive this time of year. Well, that's going to play very quickly. Let's pause it and take it back here, okay? So this is Sunday. We can see the high probability of getting freezing temperatures behind this next front, getting really down here through the eastern Corn Belt, but going through southern Illinois, getting all the way over to parts of the Panhandle of Texas. By Monday, we'll see the colder air shift here toward the Appalachian Mountains. But what I do see with this system, very, very low probability that we bring freezing temperatures far enough south to cause a major problem here with our vegetation here in the Gulf Coast states, okay? After this, watch what happens. You really see as I get out to the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, our probability of having temperatures below freezing retreats, and that's that warm-up into April that we're expecting here. So the good news is these next two cool-downs are brief. They're not going to last for very long, okay? Now, I want to show you this pattern because there's really two important features to pay attention to. This time of year, we do not want to see a ridge over Alaska. A ridge over Alaska allows for troughing here across the eastern part of the country, and that keeps us cool. Right now, what do we have? A ridge over Alaska. In fact, we have this very interesting blocked up feature here, this high over low pattern, and it's this trough that sweeps through the country. Out ahead of it, you see some warmth, but as it sweeps through, things are going to cool down. We want to do everything possible to eliminate that ridge, and we're going to see that once we progress into the first week of April, we get what we wish for, okay? So here's the phasing of those two troughs, the one that's sweeping through here and the one that's up into this area, making that system possible this weekend. But now, dominant ridge over Alaska. Look at the colder air that comes sneaking into the eastern part of the country. But you keep your eye up here on that ridge, because with time, that ridge, look at it. See it weakening and going away? And when that happens, that next trough can't have the deep influence into the part of the country once we get into the 4th, 5th, and 6th of April that it would have had otherwise. Why not? Really strong flow off the Pacific. We love this in the United States this time of year. Now, does it make for volatile pattern? Yes. But does it help eliminate the risk for really, really cold temperatures? Yes. And what do we see? Well, you keep your eye out here in the Pacific Ocean as I get you past the 5th into the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, that strong Pacific jet eliminates the big ridge over Alaska and lets warmth really come in to much of the country. So we should be quite thankful for that. In fact, looking out here on April 5th, look at how zonal and how strong that jet stream is. Zonal just means more east-west than north-south in its flow. And we want to keep that because that will get rid of that ridge over Alaska. All right? Here's the other consequence with that. look at the wetter than average conditions that come through into the northwest with that strong Pacific jet. And as these waves make it over the mountain, we do keep the middle part and the southern part of the United States quite volatile with precipitation. So this is a week 2 forecast here, looking only at week 2 precipitation anomalies. So this keeps us active, but it prevents us from getting really, really, really cold in April. All right, let's do a quick world tour here before we wrap this video up. I want to take you first to Mato Grosso, where we've got the safrinha crop going. We do know that we're in deficit overall for precipitation, but a lot of that deficit over the last 90 days was here in the month of January and February. Recently, precipitation amounts have been much better, and we've really kind of matched the climatological average with precip, even though the deficit was already built up there. So this is looking good for the safrinha crop in this area. Meanwhile, the forecast for southern Brazil is dry, and they've been really quite dry over the last week. We can see not much precipitation here. But going into the weeks prior to this, things have been quite wet. So as we're harvesting a crop down here in southern Brazil, things are looking pretty good overall. Argentina, it's been relatively dry there recently as well. So this graphic is for Cordoba. But so much rain throughout the season, you can see the surplus here, which is why the crop reports coming out of Argentina are looking good. And we do see some wetter buys coming into northern parts of Argentina from the European model over the next several days here. Just something to be on the lookout for. Meanwhile, in India, we've got a heat wave coming on at the end of this week. Widespread triple-digit heat for highs for several days in a row. Just want to keep you aware of that in India. We'll take a closer look at India as we progress into the growing season. And also remember, Trevor, that tropical storm, well, it's still bothering parts of this side. This is New South Wales and Queensland over here in Australia. So we're still bringing in precipitation into that area, which is normally quite dry this time of year. So this is what one of these tropical systems can do. And I'm going to finish up by showing you this map. This is the last 90 days looking at the CPC data. That's the climate prediction data based on rain gauges. Now, what are we talking about here? Well, yeah, look at the features. Drier Brazil, but recent heavier rains have helped out. Wetter southern Brazil and Argentina. So we've talked about that. You can see the wet conditions we've had here in the middle part of the country and also wet in California. So we're kind of using this as a gauge on the rest of the world. You know, the drier conditions that we've seen in Australia recently been met with those two tropical systems, one here and one there, that have kept things wet. And southeastern China has been extremely wet. We talked about that a few weeks ago. But why I'm bringing this up is I want to come over here to Europe, and I want to come over here to Western Russia. We've seen that Western Europe has carried a dry bias, whereas much of the Russian wheat belt and parts of Ukraine overall have seen near average to wetter than average conditions. What's been interesting about the winter in Europe is that it's been quite mild. Just looking at February and March here, we've seen that Europe has carried, as has Western Russia here, carried a warm bias, and that's continued. I know these maps are for February, but this has continued throughout the month of March. So we'll keep an update on all of these regions as we progress to where the Northern Hemisphere is planting a crop, and we'll keep you up to date each week with our weather forecast videos. With that, though, a lot of content there. We're going to wrap this one up. We at Nutrien Ag Solutions hope you look forward to our next ag forecast coming out next week. In the meantime, have a great week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.